Hello, Oregon Moto John here. We're going to talk about two of my favorite street bikes. There's lots of good street bikes out there, but as everybody knows, I like the KTM 890, which I drive off-road a lot, but this is one of these two street bikes are two of my favorites. The Yamaha MT-09, these are 2019s. Had a friend come over this morning, so we were able to collect a few extra bikes, and we have the KTM 1290 SuperDuke R, and this one's a 2015. I don't think it's a 16, I believe it's a 15, and these MT-09s are 19s. What I like about all these bikes is they're super naked bikes. They have upright riding position overall compared to some other bikes, so I like that. I feel like I'm getting on a supermoto, or with my history of dirt bike riding, I just prefer more of an upright riding position. I'm comparing these two bikes today mainly because we have the SuperDuke 1290R, which has this big V-twin, as you can see, 1300cc V-twin. It's fairly high revving for a V-twin. Makes around 180 horsepower. The way this is configured with a full race exhaust and flash and intake, it makes a little more than that, but stock 180 horsepower, 144 foot-pounds of torque, which is crazy. This bike, you put it in any gear and it just goes. And what's cool about it is, even though it makes all this horsepower, it's easy to ride if you want to ride it slower, although it's hard to, it's assuming you don't start twisting the throttle like crazy. But you can ride it slow, even though it begs to go fast. Now, the MT-09 is awesome because it's also more of an upright riding position, but it's an inline triple. And I love this motor because it's just buttery smooth. It's just always buttery smooth, so I love that. Here we have the M4 slip-on exhaust. We'll do a little sound clip. A very good way to go. You can use your factory headers, so this Yamaha is in the blue. And then here's my MT-09. It has Akrapovic exhaust. We'll do a little sound clip on that. And we haven't done much to these, just some stickers and tie detail. I think I did put some aftermarket rotors on here. Wave rotors, some Galfer wave rotors. The early bikes, they complained of a snatchy throttle. I had a 2014 MT-09, and I thought it was fine, but I guess you did have to watch the throttle a little bit more on those, but I haven't had any problems with either with these. They did change the front forks. The early ones, the front forks were pretty soft. These are adjustable, and I feel like they do fine. We did upgrade the blinkers on both of these to some LED style blinkers. Ed did the same thing with his. Those are some cool blinkers there. So we're gonna ride both these bikes. Horsepower and torque on these. I think the 19s, we're looking at 113 horsepower, 65 foot-pounds of torque. I think it was 2021. They revamped the MT-09, now they make 117 horsepower and 69 foot-pounds torque, so a little bit more. They had some emissions things going on. And these are 847cc motor. I think now, though, the 21 forward, they're 889 cc's or thereabouts. Had to bore it out to keep the horsepower numbers up with some tighter emission standards, is what I heard. But the reason I like this motor is it's buttery smooth. Just so smooth, high revving, very torquey. I put the most miles on my MT-09, and I know Ed does too. The SuperDuke I save for when I'm feeling the need for something that has just torque everywhere, power everywhere, but you have to be ready to ride something fast that you just don't want to get on that if you're tired. Maybe that's a good way of putting it. So we're gonna do a couple exhaust clips of all the bikes. This KTM has a full exhaust on it here. Akrapovic exhaust. I did put some different calipers on here, or excuse me, wave rotors. and a few things, but other than that, in the full exhaust and the intake and CPU, ECU flash for that exhaust, I've kept it overall pretty stock. So there we have it. Let's start these bikes and we'll go for a ride and talk about each. Ed and I will swap a little bit. We'll ride the MT-09, and I'll ride the SuperDuke, and he'll ride the MT-09, and then we'll swap and we'll offer our thoughts as we ride. Okay, so we're going to do a little rev clip of the M4 exhaust first, then the MT-09 with the Akrapovic, and then the SuperDuke with the Akrapovic exhaust, so you can hear. And this has the Akrapovic has the silencer out on the SuperDuke. There's a silencer you can put in it, but we decided it was best to release the beast, so we left the silencer out. So if you want to give your bike a few quick little revs. Sounds good. Okay, so now we'll move to the next bike. And we've warmed these bikes up. We're not revving these motors, and we're not revving the heck out of them or anything. We're just kind of doing little revs here, but the bikes have them down. And this is the one with the little loop in it. Quick revving bike. Don't want to make the neighbors mad, so that's probably good. And then we'll come over here to the SuperDuke. So just a quick story on, I had an MT-09 years ago, a 14, and I loved it. But then I saw a video of the SuperDuke and all the beast and all the things they talk about. So I sold my MT-09 and I got the SuperDuke, which I really did enjoy and still do enjoy. Obviously, I still have it. But then I started missing the MT-09 because it's just such a good everyday bike to drive. So back in 19, I picked that up and considered selling the SuperDuke, but I just can't do it. But these bikes are so good. They're just so good. And I don't know of anybody who doesn't like them. Just the character of the motor, I find that they handle fine. They handle really well. They're just nice bikes to ride. And for the cost, I don't think you can beat them. The SuperDuke, again, I love that bike, but for the cost, I think it's hard to beat an MT-09. So that's just a little exhaust clip there. A few comparisons. Let's go for a ride. So Ed and I we're wearing our actually our enduro helmets today because those are the ones that are plumbed for doing these kinds of things, for the intercoms. Our other helmets have intercoms, but not anything I can get my video camera to work with. So don't worry, we really do have street bike helmets. But for the purposes of filming, we're using our enduro helmets with our visors, so we're going to look really cool. We're on these sweet bikes with dirt bike helmets on, so just wanted you to know we usually look the part, but today we'll look a little goofy with our dirt bike helmets on, but at least we'll be able to share the experience with you. Most of these bikes you can control them, they're rideable. I don't know that I would call these beginners bikes, because you need to learn to modulate the throttle, because the SuperDuke, and the MT-09 is very similar. I just barely move that throttle and I'm getting a response. Now, I'm driving this bike in kind of its normal mode, if you will, because if I put it in the unbridled mode, it's it's quite a bit to handle. So getting on the throttle, you can see just instant response there. But very, very rideable. And so I'm on the SuperDuke now, 1290R, and I will switch in a little bit. On the way out, I'll ride this bike. On the way back, I'll ride the MT-09. So just a few thoughts. The SuperDuke is very rideable. You just have a pretty sensitive throttle. After I did the race mapping I had the flash done, it was more sensitive, but not in a bad way. But so we need to keep that in mind. But just a nice bike, a little more vibration than the MT-09, because the MT-09 is an inline triple, which I think is a gem of a motor. Whereas this is a big V twin, a 1300cc twin. So, you know, two 650cc pistons in a V twin. That's kind of ridiculous. And no speed shifting on this one. So on each of those gear changes, my front end was barely off the ground. I remember when I first got this bike, the first time I went to pass someone, I went up to maybe 85, 90 to get around them real quick and then sit back in. And I remember when I let off the throttle, when I got around him, it shocked me that I felt the front end set down. It really actually scared me, because I'd never been on a bike that would pull the front end off that ground. And the electronics only let you, in the regular setting I'm in now, only let you raise the wheel like maybe 6 inches or so, or it's like 3 to 6 inches. But I didn't even know that the front end was off the ground till it touched, and then my handlebars, you know, moved a little, because my handlebars were off center just barely. And it really, really freaked me out, because that could have gone poorly. We could have passed a car that eaten it as my front end was set back down. But the handling of both these bikes is really good. You just have to respect these bikes. I guess I was making the point is I wouldn't recommend these as beginners bikes, not because they're not good rideable bikes, just because you need to learn to modulate throttle and brakes and some of those things first before you jump to these bikes with a lot of power on tap very easily, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Both these bikes weigh in at about 417 pounds or so. Give or take a little bit, but so they're both, in my opinion, relatively light bikes. The SuperDuke I'm on doesn't have the speed shifter, but the new ones do. Ed's MT-09 has it, and it's you're easily able to add it even if you don't have it. So I'm just going to take off here a little bit. There's SuperDuke acceleration, and I'm not even working that motor hard. I'm just giving it a little gas. Very nice to drive. I'm in an upright position. I love the naked bike experience. Not a lot of fairings around me. I feel like I'm just flying through the air. You can see I've got the older gauge cluster, I think in 15, 16, 17. It had this analog system with a little digital thing on the side, which I like. The new ones have updated screens, which are probably a little more modern, but I don't mind this. I like the tactile prominent. Likewise on the MT-09, the 14 to 19s have an older screen. It's kind of monochrome, which again I don't mind. I buy the bike for the riding experience, but you know, I don't know if it's 20 or 21, they have the updated color screen, which is nice. I know if something comes with that, I'll certainly take it. So just a few differences. I'm trying to decide. Rev match there, and these bikes just love the tip end. They're so nice to corner with. They twist that throttle. SuperDuke wants to go any gear. So here's a gear. I can shift down and rev it, and it wants to rev, or you can just leave it in a higher gear. Very easy to ride because there's just power and torque everywhere. Now, when I'm on the MT-09, I do like that I get to shift a little more. I have to, even though the inline triple makes good torque, it is important to select the right gear, and I like that. You know, there's something to be said about it's many times more fun to ride a slower bike faster, and the MT-09, I'm not calling it slow, compared to like this bike. I have to be so careful, or I'll end up with my license taken away.
or my bike impounded or something, or dead. And with, you know, kids and family and wife and work, I just don't need to be exiting early. So just something to keep in mind on the SuperDuke and the MT-09 is you really have to try to ride responsibly. And if you are going to open the bike up, try to do it in a place where there aren't people or traffic around, there aren't inlets or outlets to the highway that people can pull out in front of you. Track would probably be the best place to do those kinds of things, you know, if you're going to open the bike up. But just a good handling bike. I like the SuperDuke has really plus tall suspension. I should have touched on that. I don't know what the travel is on it, but I'll just tell you it's a lot, because I've never bottomed the suspension out. I've never had the suspension do something that I didn't like. My wife even prefers to ride this 2-up the best out of all my bikes, because she feels that it feels the most controlled and plush, which kind of surprised me. I wouldn't want to sit on that little perch back there. It kind of seemed like it'd be a scary place to be, but she doesn't seem to think so. So here I am, finding the gear. There's nice rocks on this corner, but there isn't much today. Leaning in, coming back out. And if you want to squeeze that throttle, it can actually give you what I would call violent acceleration. When I first got this bike, I think I was having so much fun just taking off fast, 0 to 60 kind of stuff, that I peeled the back tire off in I think about 2,000 miles. So maybe it was 2,500 miles and I had a bald back tire, and I wasn't burning out or anything like that. I was just accelerating fast. There's so much torque, 144 foot-pounds of torque, 180 horsepower. It just, I think it's hard on a back tire. That's my guess. And the MT-09 too, for that matter. It's got a lot of power and a lot of torque in it. If you're not careful with that, you'll be replacing your back tire fairly frequently. But it's nice to have the grip when you want it. So long travel suspension on the SuperDuke, big torquey motor. See, here I am at 3,500 RPM, and I just twist that throttle and it wants to go. So it's just very easy to get to scooting with this. But the MT-09, you'll see when I'm riding it, it's fun to shift that thing, that inline triple down, and here it's just revving and making smooth power in a totally different way. And I guess that's why I chose to review these two bikes together, is they both are fun to ride and they both make excellent power, but they do it in a completely different way. One's doing it with a big V twin, lots of torque, lots of cc's, lots of fuel, and the MT-09's doing it with this an efficient inline triple that just likes to rev, but it's really smooth, still makes good torque, and it's super fun to drive. It's the character of that motor. Like I was saying earlier, when I got rid of it years ago, I just missed that MT-09, so I got another one. And if I'm going to ride on the street, like Ed calls me up, hey, let's go for a ride, most of the time I'm taking my MT-09. It's a tad lower to the ground. It's just a little more, is me being a 5'7" fella, just kind of a smaller guy, I feel like it's probably just fits me a little better, although I don't feel uncomfortable on the SuperDuke. But the SuperDuke, I do find it challenging to drive it slow. I will say that. And that's not a negative, it's just if something has 180 horsepower, maybe that's the drawback. Ed, why don't you go ahead and pull by me here, and I want to just catch some footage of that bike. Just a good looking bike. And you can hear his exhaust. Go ahead and rev that. Oh, it sounds good. I don't know if that shows up in the clip, but it sounds really good. Just a nice looking bike. I mean, so rideable. I think Yamaha hit something really special with the MT-09. throttle position. And Ed and I were just saying we checked our tire pressure and all that before we rode today. That's always important on any bike, but it's especially on these street bikes. That's a good thing to do.
Mirror plugs in because that wind noise will deafen you.
So I'm going to do a little clip here.
Okay.
So this bike is pretty flickable in the corners, and I can just run through the gears and short shift, and there's lots of power and torque on tap. Or you can rev it out, and it's ridiculous. So here I'll rev it out a little bit. And the front end was floating, all of that. And so when you start revving that bike out, it gets very brisk. So this is a very versatile motor. You can run it around, just kind of torque it around a little bit, but if you want to rev it up, it's not like a lot of V-twins that I've driven where you know, you use the torque, and if you try revving them out, they actually start stumbling on themselves and hitting rev limiters and stuff. But this, I've never hit the rev limiter. Just lots of power everywhere. I haven't had this bike on a track, but I think it would be a lot of fun because it seems very trackable to me, as far as being able to put the power down and not do anything that you're not expecting. And part of that is probably the electronics. SuperDuke, really good brakes, very strong. So you can just come out of a corner, and here I won't shift. I'm at 3,500 RPM, and it'll just, if I twist that throttle, it is gonna go. So I can lug it around like this, power out of a corner, or you can drop a gear, rev it a little more, and then come out of the corner, and a little more brisk acceleration. And just so nice to roll on that throttle, and it wants to go. So usable. And throttle, even though it's not an inline motor, you can hear it's still very flippable and brisk for an inline twin. And this does have a single-sided swing arm, which I just think is cool. And there are lots of bikes faster than these. You know, there's just a ton of fast bikes out there anymore. But this, for what it is plenty fast, put it that way. And anymore, I just like the riding experience of a bike. I like feeling something that just has good handling characteristics in the chassis, feels rigid, feels controlled, feels balanced. And the MT-09 feels that way to me. Feels very, very controlled. And the SuperDuke feel that way to me. The MT-09 and the SuperDuke 1290 are just very, very controlled, fun to ride. I get on the bikes and I feel like I'm just in the bike, I'm not on top of the bike. So I love that. One thing I like about the 1290 is you forget you're on a big, powerful bike because it just, I don't know, you feel so at home on it fairly quickly. They did a nice job of just balancing the bike on both the MT-09 and the SuperDuke 1290. And any of the Duke bikes are really good. The 790, 890, all those are just well done. And the same can be said with Yamaha. They have their whole MT 07 is a great bike. There's just so many good bikes to be had today, and other manufacturers as well. About the SuperDuke, I'll be talking about and riding the MT-09 in a moment, is the power production on this bike is just very, very smooth. If you're smooth with the throttle, it'll reward you with being smooth. If you want really an aggressive throttle, if you make an aggressive throttle response, you're going to have a very aggressive response from the bike, like that. But if you just are smooth with the throttle, it's gonna be smooth back. So it's, you can, I guess where I'm going is, even though this is a very powerful bike, you can ride it smooth. It's, I like that about it, is you can go out and just go out for a little cruise around kind of a ride, or you can get on it and just get some real brisk acceleration like that. But you better hang on and make sure you're watching what your front end's doing. Okay, we're going to switch up here, and I'll be riding the MT-09. 9 is such a good value. I don't even know how they make a bike like that for $8,000 to $9,000. I think they're like $899 and $999 or something like that. But basically, I think when I bought mine, it was around $8,000, and that's such a value. I mean, you get you get a lot of bike, and the front suspension is. They tightened up the forks in 19. The rear, some people swap out the rear shock, but I find that for what we're doing, it's great. So we're gonna swap bikes. Ed, go ahead and get on the SuperDuke. I want to see how your feet fit on the ground on this bike compared to the MT-09. So he's putting the kickstand up. A little higher?
Quite a bit.
Okay, so like I was saying, the SuperDuke has a lot of travel in that suspension, and it has to come from somewhere. So it's, the
guy was a little heavier. I'm like 155 pounds, so you weigh 200. I guess it would scrunch down another half inch or so.
Yep, but still able to get both feet down.
Oh yeah, very comfortable, not unsafe.
And you have a 32-inch inseam.
Correct. And
I have a 30-inch inseam, and I can still tippy-toe down with both legs, so I feel comfortable on it.
Yeah, just on my MT-09, I'm like this, just flat.
And now you're up.
But this is not uncomfortable.
Okay. Well, let's go for a ride. Riding the MT-09 back, and Ed's going to be on the SuperDuke 1290R. So we've got 3 modes on the MT-09, and the SuperDuke has a rain, kind of a sport and a track mode as well. But on the MT-09 you have standard mode, which helps you modulate the throttle. A little throttle response gives you just a pretty moderate throttle engine fueling response. So able to modulate the throttle. In town I usually run standard mode, and you push this button here. A mode, I call that A for awesome, which is a little throttle response. A little throttle movement gives a large throttle response, so it's nice if you're out on a road. You really want to, if I'm being a hooligan, I tend to put it in A mode. And then B mode is kind of I'd call it rain mode, more of a little throttle, a large throttle response gives you a little bit of engine response, so kind of a detune mode, if you will. So I'm going to go with standard mode for now, and then at some point I'll switch it to A mode, so to maybe talk about the differences. And this has a quick shifter installed, and this little light shows up, so I'll talk about that. And so let's ride. So you can feel already, for me, this is just so smooth. It's just a little bit smaller overall bike, and me being a small guy, I just feel I feel at home. And I felt at home on the SuperDuke, but on the MT-09, it just somehow, the ergonomics for just being a little guy, I just feel at home. I don't know how to say it. And just nice power production here. I think I'll go to the right. And the brakes feel good on this. I've never had a problem with Yamaha brakes. And just... So there's the quick shift. I just bumped through a couple of those. So the quick shift works good. I don't downshift with the quick shifter because I've heard it doesn't rev match. And even in bikes that do, I've heard that you're better off rev matching yourself. to be better on the gearbox. But just such a gem of a bike. Plenty of power. Scoots along just fine. And just very, here I can blip that throttle, and it just goes. Very nice. And so smooth.
Kind of, I don't know what you call it, little backrest thing to where you push back and you feel real comfortable on it.
It's got that little, the second pylon seat, it gives you
a little hump back there, which kind of, you just, you know, on the flat seat, you push back, you kind of eternally push back. This has got a little stopping point. I do like the feel of that. I like that.
Yeah, so Ed was saying that the SuperDuke, he likes the riding position, the seating position. I like the riding position on the MT-09 very much. Oh, there's a four-way they added here. So that's relatively new. But MT-09, just so much fun because you can roll through the gears and actually shift and ride. Whereas with the SuperDuke, I always felt like I blipped the throttle a couple times and I'm like, oh, you're going too fast. Gotta watch it. So this, I actually feel like I get to ride and can get into a corner, and in the standard mode, the throttle is very nice to modulate. I can roll on. And this inline triple is so smooth. I don't feel any vibration in the handlebars. It's just so smooth. And if you want to downshift and get more out of it, it's got more to give. So just a very nice bike. And I'm going to switch this to, so you can see in standard mode, I can go through, come out of a corner and roll on, and it just gives me nice even throttle modulation. Or I can go to A mode, which is there. Okay, now I give a little bit of throttle and it really blips the engine. So for open riding like this, I probably prefer A mode, because it come out of a corner and I don't have to give it a lot of throttle to get moving. I guess maybe that's because SuperDuke's kind of like that. But in town, I will switch it generally back to standard mode, but you wouldn't have to. Such a smooth, trackable bike. Beautiful day to be out riding. The KTM,
Yeah.
V-twin is very smooth, and like you said, it's very KTM-like. Ed has a 690 Enduro R, so he's used to how KTM's handle, and he's right. It's very. There is something about the 1290. You get on it, and if you've had any experience with other KTM bikes, you'll feel it. You'll feel that engineering at work, which is good. So I'm in A mode on the MT-09, and oh man, it feels good, very blippable, and it just likes to rev. And I was reading this morning on the 2023 MT-09, it's supposed to have more chassis rigidity and different things and lean sensors, but I just noticed my shoelace is untied on my right boot, so we're going to get that taken care of here. You can hear how blippable that throttle is. You just come out, it just wants to go. Just a great bike. Good torque off the bottom too. I've always liked inline triples because they kind of like they have torque kind of like a V-twin, but they still rev like an inline 4. So I like that. I like that characteristic of a bike. This torque is usable, so you want a certain amount of torque, but I do like a bike to rev. These motors like to rev. You can hear how that just wants to go. And I'm just shifting because I like to shift right now. Very smooth, very controllable. And good brakes. Fun to rev match. Or you can shift it up, use the torque, and drive it a little more conservatively. It's got plenty of torque in the lower range, you don't have to rev it. A little gravel on the corner up here, Ed, but not bad.
Yep, I got it.
So there's a little quick shift action right there. I just didn't want to go for the clutch, come out of a corner. So there's the quick shifter again. Very, very usable. Nice to come out of a corner and not have to worry about going for the clutch, but you can still clutch it with the quick shifter and it'll let you do that. But I would not downshift with the quick shifter. Here I am using the torque to come out of this corner. It's such a good, comfortable bike ride. MT-09 action there. Lots of fun. Love it. These little speedboats always crack me up here. I mean, you wonder what Oh yeah, a little wheelie action there. MT-09 has plenty of torque.
You right?
Yeah, I took right. Went right. How do you like those little speedboats there?
Yeah, those are sweet.
They look like just death traps, don't they?
Yeah, I'm surprised we don't have one.
Yeah, they would be fun. Can you imagine ripping around in those things? They would probably be a blast.
I don't think it'd take much to get some air in the front and flip you over.
Right. Well, your bike has plenty of torque. I was doing a little wheelie.
Oh yeah, they'll do it real easy. No problem.
They're wheelie machines. And it feels so comfortable in the corners.
Yes, it just kind of feels like it just goes where you look.
And there's a couple of guys on some Harley type bikes, and I like when we all are waving and we're all on two wheels, so we're all having fun. That's all that matters.
Maybe I'll get one of those when I get old.
I like it.
It's got a stance and a feel, pegs, everything feel like a 690.
Yeah, doesn't it?
I mean, it's more sporty. I mean, there's no question about it. It's a different bike, but I can tell it's a cousin.
Yes, you can tell that the 1290 is a cousin. It has that DNA, that KTM DNA.
It does.
That long travel suspension and everything.
Yeah.
It's just, and it
feels like a super safe bike, you know, to ride. It just, if you're gonna twist the throttle much, you better have your big boy pants on.
That's right.
That's all I can tell you, because it's gonna do some shit.
Well, this MT-09 too, I feel like I get on here and I'm just right at home. I feel like very comfortable. I just feel like everything's where it's supposed to be. The shifter, the brakes. I just feel at home on this bike. And the gearbox is good on both bikes. I feel like they both shift nice. I don't encounter any false neutrals on either bike, so I like that. But I feel like this MT-09, when I get on it, I just feel like I'm at home. There's a car here. It's gonna pull out. No, that's good. Good, watch that guy. And what I love about the MT-09 is it's got, I feel like it's got just the right amount of power. It's not overpowered, but it's not underpowered. It's just
No.
the SuperDuke, I feel like it's just too easy to go fast. I mean,
it has a ridiculous amount of power. So I mean, you can be doing 80 and do a wheelie.
You can.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, just all you got to do is twist it. You're on one wheel.
You're on one wheel, and your lips are plastered back to your ears. Oil on the road there or something.
Okay.
I haven't really done that yet, so we're just going to take off here. Very brisk. Love it. Very good bike. Just scoots along just fine. Oh, I've got literally a bee in my bonnet, but it didn't sting me. So, I guess the bee thought I was buzzing along fast, thought he would join me. Yeah, that was special, Ed. I don't know if it was a bee, but it was a fly or something buzzing.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
But I opened the visor and he flew back out. But the acceleration is great on the MT-09. I don't want any more. I'm very, very content with what it does. And people talk about this bike having a snatchy throttle and all these different things, mainly in 2014, but I feel like with the different maps, you can pick what you want. If it's too snatchy, put it to standard mode, and it smooths right out. But I just, and especially 19, they redid the mapping and things. I think 19 on, that was solved, but I didn't feel like it was a big deal on the 14s. That bike is a good point, Ed.
I mean, it's very comfortable. Just because of unfamiliarity, I've been just kind of putting around behind you, and I accelerate when I need to, but it does not feel restrictive to drive it slower. Accelerate slower, it just doesn't.
Yeah, you can drive the SuperDuke slow, and it doesn't mind it.
No, it really doesn't mind it. You need to have a gear where it's revved a little bit, but it doesn't feel over revved. But it's very comfortable. I can ride it just like I'm just taking a nice leisurely drive through the country. You don't have to drive it hard. But if you want to, it's there.
Go ahead and keep going by here, and I'll just keep talking. So yeah, you find that bike is pretty comfortable just to kind of limp around on, just to putt around on. And if you want to zip on by me, feel free.
Okay.
Just catch a little clip of you on the SuperDuke.
Right, well, once we get out of town here, I'll do that.
Sure.
I like that property back there. They had.
He's on the SuperDuke. See if I can catch it here. But here he is. He's just a real rideable bike. It's really comfortable on it. And the SuperDuke's fun. Now like I said, this is a 15. It's aging pretty well. It still looks good. Now they've removed some of the fairings from the rear of the bike, so you see the trellis frame. Some guys remove, even on this bike, the frame, some of the fairings on the back part of the frame, the plastics. But it still looks good. It's aging well. When I got the bike, I wasn't sure how it was going to age because it's such an aggressive look, but I feel like it's aging pretty well overall. It doesn't look dated or unusual. It just still looks good. 1290R. Oh, there he goes. I hear that exhaust running. It's just a nice bike to drive at a reasonable pace. Both these bikes. I'll get around this corner and then we'll. So I'm coming up on Ed on the 1290.
There you go. Go.
There he is. Looking good.
Yeah.
Nice day to be out for a ride.
Yeah, this is a good day for a ride. Feel pretty rested today, and
Yeah, Ed and I both have a policy where if we're feeling tired, we generally don't get on a motorcycle.
yeah.
It just seems like a good policy. I mean, sometimes a bike ride will wake you up and you feel good.
Yeah.
If you're fatigued from.
I slept really good last night, so actually kind of overslept for me. So got up a little after 5 or 5:30 or something or whatever. And so I did get a lot of rest, which does help.
I just don't think it's a good idea to be on a machine that needs good reaction time and balance
Yeah.
and braking. I just don't think it makes sense to crawl on one if you're not feeling okay. If you're tired from a day at work or you just aren't feeling it, then sometimes it's good to defer that till another day. Just a quick note on maintenance. I do service my bikes. And
I couldn't quite hear you, John.
oh, I was just talking about service.
Oh, yeah.
I do service, these bikes, and Ed services his. The Yamaha is very easy to service. It's got a spin-on filter. You spin it off, pull a plug, oil drains out, plug in, spin the filter on, oil in, done. The KTM, you've got a couple of screens behind a couple of different plugs that you gotta, with magnets, you gotta kind of hit with some carburetor cleaner, or brake cleaner or something, and then blow it out with compressed air, and then you have a cartridge paper filter that you need to replace. So 3 different areas that kind of need attention. So not horrible, but just I feel like it takes a little more time than servicing the Yamaha. So it's just something to think about. Seems like Honda and Yamaha's the service on the Japanese bikes is always so easy. And the KTM, it isn't horrible. It just takes a little more, I guess. Just talking about reliability, I haven't had problems with either of these bikes, the 1290 or the MT-09. And Ed, that's over 3 bikes, so Ed hasn't had any trouble with his. I haven't had any trouble with my MT-09, and I had 0 troubles with my 2014 MT-09. I haven't had any trouble with the SuperDuke. Parts replaced. Just nothing. I hate to say that, but it's more of a break. But none of the bikes, I haven't had any issues. So that's just I guess a good point to talk about. It kind of scallops out here, so you can sit down in here, and you got a spot to like lean up against. Kind of gives you a little cockpit. Whereas this isn't a bad thing, but it lets you move around in a different way. The SuperDuke's a little wider. You got to make room for a big motor, because like Ed was saying, that's a lot of motor to have in a pretty small bike. It's not much wider than the MT-09, but it's a lot of motor sitting there. And the MT-09, inline triple, kind of, you can see how it's oriented there. well-designed bike. They both kind of are like bulldogs, kind of wide in the front and then they taper back. And both these bikes, you can ride them slow, but if you give them a kick in the ribs, you better hang on, they'll go. MT-09 versus the SuperDuke 1290R. Highlights of the 1290 would be lots of torque, lots of horsepower, longer travel suspension, really comfortable seating position. Got the single-sided swing arm. Kind of just some of the highlights of that bike. Torquey motor. MT-09, upright riding position. Decent brakes. Nice plush suspension. If you're going to push it harder, sometimes you might have to stiffen up that preload. Smooth inline triple, still making torque, high revving. A lot of bike for the money. Easier to ride, in my opinion, around town. You know, not be going at a speed that you don't want to be going at. SuperDuke, you can also keep it at a speed you want to be at. You just have to be mindful with the throttle and be intentional with not going too fast. So, my opinion, both great bikes, both different, but both similar. Both naked bikes, both upright riding position. Both, in my opinion, good-looking bikes. I think they've aged well over time, so I don't think you couldn't go wrong with either of these bikes. They're just similar but different, and different in good ways, and I like them both. All right, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you want more motorcycle content on and off road. And anyway, we'll do some service on the MT-09 oil changes and things, but we could talk about some of the modifications we've made, but just little things. All right, have an awesome day. Thanks for watching.